It was November of 1967, and the United States was in the midst of building up its forces in Vietnam.
I kind of figured.
Throughout the month, American troops struggled to secure strategic areas in the surroundings of the town of Dak To, in a flat valley surrounded by sharp peaks nearly a mile high. The area served as a forward staging base for some of the most top-secret U.S. Special Forces missions of the Vietnam War. The battles fought during those weeks would go down in history as some of the most brutal of the entire conflict. However, it wasn't only the enemy that posed a threat to American ground troops. On November 19th, on Hill 875, the 2nd Battalion of the 173rd Airborne Brigade was in dire need of support.
Wait a second. What did you say? Oh, shit.
75, the 2nd Battalion of the 173rd Airborne Brigade.
The 2nd Battalion of the 173rd Airborne Brigade. I don't know if you guys know this, but that's where I was stationed. That was my unit in Italy. I was in 2nd Battalion, Fusion Company, 173rd. It's actually called the 173rd Airborne Combat Brigade, but just Airborne Brigade is just faster and just shorter. So, yeah, that's actually pretty awesome. Getting to hear a story of my people.
November 19th, on Hill 875, the 2nd Battalion of the 173rd Airborne Brigade was in dire need of support to counterattack a significant movement of North Vietnamese troops. Help was on the way, but it wasn't what anyone expected. As a U.S. Marine Corps A-4 Skyhawk approached with two 500-pound bombs, chaos reigned, and one of the darkest
What are those fucking J-dams? Two 500-pound bombs? Probably J-dams.
Moments of the war was about to take place. Guerrilla. In the fall of 1967, the United States was seeking to progressively escalate the war in Vietnam and push the North.
You sent a whisper? Bro, I don't even know how those work. Let me check Twitch real quick.
North Vietnamese to surrender.
I missed this. Let me go back. We were in commercial break and I was talking. Hold on.
Guerrilla. In the fall of 1967, the United States was seeking to progressively escalate the war in Vietnam and push the North Vietnamese to surrender. The number of American casualties had dramatically increased during the last 2 years, rising to up to 16,000, and the war was barely beginning. Thus, from 125,000 ground troops initially deployed to the country, there were now about 500,000. Meanwhile, the North Vietnamese had come up with yet another plan to fight the Americans.
Traps.
Their opponents had overwhelming firepower and inflicted massive casualties on them. As a result, they opted to change tactics and sought to get so close to American ground forces that they couldn't request air support.
That's actually called hugging. I learned that in a video that we watched about the first Chechnyan war between Chechnya and Russia. And the Chechnyans would get so close to the Russian enemy that that air support could not fire on them. It's called hugging. That's damn. Because at the time, Chechnya, all they had was just ground troops, guerrilla war fighters, and just the power of Islam, right? But Russia had tanks, they had air superiority, they had helicopters, they had jets, and they just could not fire upon the enemy because the Chechnyans would get so dangerously close to the Russians that the air support would be like, yo, we'll kill you if we fire, essentially.
And inflicted massive casualties on them. As a result, they opted to change tactics and sought to get so close to American ground forces that they couldn't request air support. The new tactic would be tested in the surroundings of the small town of Dak To in the Central Highlands, and the U.S. Army sent the 4th Infantry and the 173rd Airborne Brigade to meet the North Vietnamese in the hills around the town. After setting up a base camp in Dak To, the brigade would send companies to locate the enemy, executing search and destroy missions. Every time the Americans encountered the North Vietnamese, they would strike immediately and search for another hiding spot. During the first 3 weeks of November, both sides engaged in heavy firefights to control the high grounds. But soon after, the Americans located an enemy stronghold on Hill 875, named for its height in meters. The brigade's 2nd Battalion soon received orders to secure the hill. At 9:43 in the morning of
High ground is paramount when it comes to this type of shit.
November 19th, 1967, 3 companies of the 2nd 503rd repositioned to assault the disputed highland. Companies C and D then climbed up the slope, while 2 platoons from Company A.
I really do wonder if the names of these companies are the same back then as they were whenever I served, because whenever I served under the 173rd, our company names weren't traditional company names. So like, like if you've ever served in the military, you'll have like Alpha Company, Bravo Company, Charlie Company, and Delta Company. That's not how it was for the 173rd whenever I served under them. For us, it was Attack Company, Battle Company, Chosen Company. Can't remember what the fuck Delta Company would have been called. I don't even think there was one, but I think if it was, Delta was part of First Bat. I just don't know their name. And then Fusion Company was my company.
Companies C and D then climbed up the slope, while 2 platoons from Company A covered their rear in a classic formation used in World War I known as 2 up, 1 back. The weapons platoon remained at the bottom of the hill, behind the rest of Company A, to cut out a landing zone. Instead of carrying out a frontal attack with the bulk of their forces, the unit employed a strategy to advance small groups that could surround North Vietnamese positions and then call in air and artillery support. Roughly 45 minutes later, they had moved within 300 meters of the crest.
Oof.
Suddenly, the North Vietnamese opened machine gun fire on the paratroopers, halting their advance. Next, B-40 rockets and 57mm recoilless rifle fire were unleashed upon the Americans. The brave soldiers kept striving to advance, but the enemy was concealed in interconnected networks of bunkers and trenches. With this strategy, they could fire at the advancing troops, even with small arms and hand grenades. Augie Scarino, then Specialist 4th Class in Company C, would later recount that, quote, "The fighting just continued back and forth. We couldn't really move up that much. Most of the time you couldn't even see them because the foliage was so thick, but the bullets, you could hear them whizzing by you."
Jungle warfare, bro. I'll say this about Vietnam. I would have hated fighting in the jungle for that exact reason. You can't see anything. It's a jungle, bro. Fucking trees, leaves, bushes, just jungle, man. They probably had a hard time seeing them too, and vice versa. That's why I was kind of thankful for the territory that I had to fight in, because it was just nothing but open stretches of just nothing. And you had mountains, and you could easily see people. And it wasn't that hard to spot these motherfuckers unless they were like really hunkered down inside of a cave or a culvert or under a bridge or something like that. But 9 times out of 10, they move like fucking idiots. So they made it somewhat easy. But jungle warfare, guerrilla warfare, that's just...
Cutting leaves and the leaves just falling on top of you. Someone next to you maybe would get wounded. The Americans were forced to stop and lay low, but finding any kind of cover was challenging. They kept fighting for hours until 2:30 a.m., when all of a sudden, North Vietnamese troops hidden at the rear of Company A executed a mass assault.
Damn.
Unbeknownst to the Americans,
Flanked.
they had stepped into a carefully planned ambush. Friendly fire.
Damn.
The North Vietnamese began to pressure the American battalion from all 4 sides. Scarino would say, quote, "We made a tight little perimeter, and we basically fought off the North Vietnamese who were attacking us from the bottom of the hill. We couldn't go forward because they were entrenched at the top of the hill. We weren't sure how many were behind us. We were trapped." Company A was suddenly in danger of being overrun, and the soldiers were compelled to retreat up the slope to meet their fellow Americans there, or else they would be isolated and shot down. Several volunteers then set up an ambush and halted the advance of the incoming North Vietnamese. Among them were Private First Class Carlos Lozada and Specialist 4 John Spear. However, before they could set up their M60 machine gun, the enemy was already firing at them. Lozada then strove to hold the rearguard position of his company as his friends escaped, moving the North Vietnamese down as they tried to advance. Lozada would not abandon his position and reluctantly refused to retreat, finally succumbing to the enemy fire.
Damn.
He was later bestowed a posthumous Medal of Honor for saving his company that day. Meanwhile, John Spear was also shot, but managed to crawl back to his company and join the wounded. What remained of the 2nd Battalion then formed a defensive perimeter and called for help. Intense fighting continued inside the thick jungle, and when airstrikes and artillery were called in, they inflicted minor damage due to the density of the foliage on the hillside. To make matters worse, the soldiers were about to run out of ammunition. Water was running dangerously low. Still, it was impossible to reach the battalion. That afternoon, 6 UH helicopters were either shot down or severely damaged while attempting to reach the 2nd 503rd. dug in on the steep hillside.
That is fucking devastating to have that many helicopters shot down.
Men were fighting just beside napalm fires, and they were also exposed to the North Vietnamese holding on inside their tunnels. The situation was critical enough when at 6:58 p.m., a devastating accident took place. 2 bombs from a Marine Corps A-4 Skyhawk fighter bomber fell to the ground at hundreds of miles per hour.
It looks like a brown
The
Jimmy
2
Neutron.
500-pound Mark 81 Snake Eye bombs fell into the perimeter of the second 503rd,
Damn.
and even though the first was a dud, the second one did detonate and caused a huge fireball, followed by 10 seconds of pure silence. The bomb had fallen right on the 2nd Battalion's command post, where the most badly wounded soldiers awaited medevac helicopters.
Damn.
Augie Scarino would later describe the scene, quote, "All I saw was black smoke, and like a big flash. It's like when you strike a match. It's just a big fire, and that was it." Beloved Catholic priest Major Charles Waters served as the battalion's chaplain and had rescued plenty of wounded soldiers earlier in the battle, as well as administered last rites.
Yo, I like that. Chaplain actually getting his hands dirty and doing some fucking work. We had chaplains when we were deployed, but these fuckers never left the wire. They never left the fob. They just sat in the office all day and just said, "Hey, if you need anybody to talk to, I'm here." And like they were nice and stuff like that, and they were cordial, and they were someone that you could talk to about literally anything. If you were sad, you talk to them. You're angry, talk to them. You got problems back home, you talk to them. You were feeling a certain type of way about your current existence, you talk to them, right? But they never got their they never. Nah. Maybe early in their career they did some stuff, but when I was deployed with them, they never left. Man, they didn't do anything except for provide a shoulder to cry on if we needed one. That was really it.
He was there among the medics and was also awarded a posthumous Medal of Honor. The impact took the lives of 42 men on the spot and wounded 45 more,
Damn.
virtually stripping away all commanders and medics and leaving the battalion even more vulnerable.
All commanders? Jesus Christ. That's probably the hardest blow that the 173rd took in this fight came from Marines. Not saying it was on purpose, but they suffered more catastrophic loss at the hands of these bombs dropped by Marine helicopters than they did the Viet Cong or whoever it is that's here that they're fighting. That's unfortunate.
Aftermath. A fatal mistake from the air caused chaos on the ground. After the initial shock passed, there was moaning and crying, but there were insufficient medicines like morphine and plasma, as well as a lack of water and food. Unscathed, Specialist John Wamby Cook emerged from a pile of broken tree trunks. He later recalled, quote, "I thought it couldn't have been our guys, until I..."
This guy's such a badass, man. Look at him. He's laying on the ground, probably on a stretcher, probably fucked up, smoking a cigarette. That's the soldier way right there, dude. What age group would you say was begging to leave the wire for permission? You didn't have to beg to leave the wire. You were leaving the wire. At least we were. There's some people that deploy and never leave because their job dictates that they stay on the fob or whatever. But yeah, there was none of that for us. If you were going, bro, we were going on foot patrols. You were going on a fucking convoy. There was no begging about it, really. So but I will say the average age, the age of all of us, for my platoon, I can't really speak for other platoons because I knew them, but I didn't know them as intimately as I did my own platoon. But my platoon was between the ages of 18 and 30, really. Most of our sergeants were late 20s. And then most of our E4s and below were all 18 to 21, for the most part. A couple of 25-year-olds in the mix, but most of the sergeants pretty much played daddy to a lot of us, for the most part, because that's just the role they took up. And when you're an older fellow and all of your comrades are 18, 19 years old, you kind of feel like a fucking father, really, for the most part, because you're having to tell these hey, don't do that. Hey, Get your ass over here. Hey, stop that. Put that down. Shit like that, so.
I heard someone on the radio say, "Stop, you're killing us." Captain Dick Getz was overflying the area and witnessed the event. He would later say during an interview that, quote, "It was obvious when the explosion went off that it was in the wrong place." John Spears survived the explosion but lost an arm. He heard his colleagues screaming for help. He had to scream too, as he urgently needed a tourniquet. The survivor later recounted, quote, "I passed out, and miraculously, somehow, when I woke up, all my bleeding had stopped. I pulled myself
Your body went into shock, and that's probably what saved your life.
a long way until I got away from the area a little bit." To hide from the North Vietnamese hunting down scattered Americans, Spear had to hide underneath his deceased teammates and remained hidden for a couple of days until he was rescued.
That's so fucking morbid and dreadful. Good lord.
Wounded and vulnerable, the survivors were concerned about more than their injuries. It was evident that the North Vietnamese would launch an attack to finish them anytime soon, and they needed to stay vigilant. As Cook put it, quote, "We expected an all-out assault. We had our rear covered, but it was just a matter of when they were going to start coming over the berm. Fortunately, the North Vietnamese never came. However, the survivors had to withstand the entire night until
The North Vietnamese probably never came because they didn't realize that y'all just got hit with the mother of all fucking bombs, and with friendly fire. They probably didn't even know. Because had they known that y'all were that fucked up and y'all got hit with friendly fire, man, they would have been on y'all so fast.
3 companies from the 4th Battalion could retrieve them. Because of the intense fire from snipers and mortars, not to mention the dense terrain, it wasn't until nightfall that the rescuers reached the beleaguered battalion. 2 days after the incident, both battalions moved out to take the crest. And by the end of the month, the Americans had pushed the enemy away and secured the hilltop. But the Battle of Hill 875 had taken 87 lives from the 2nd Battalion
Damn.
and wounded 130. In addition, 3 soldiers were never found and are still officially missing in action. It was one of the darkest days of the war for America, and yet there were many dire years in Vietnam still to come.
That's rough.
Thank you
That
for watching our video.
Is
Please subscribe to all our Dark Documentaries channels for more exciting historical anecdotes, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
that battle that they had on that hill. That they did more damage to themselves at the than the North Vietnamese ever could have. And that's just rough. But then again, I guess I would have to take some solace in the fact that I got injured and or killed by one of my own accidentally because of a lack of communication than be killed by the fucking enemy, because when you're at war, fuck the enemy, right? So, I never witnessed any friendly fire when I was over there at all. I saw some dude rip his finger off like a moron. That shit was hilarious too, because the finger that got ripped off was his ring finger, and he was married. That shit was hilarious. So the rest of the deployment, he just wore his he wore his wedding band around his dog tags, which was just funny. We fucked with him, and he literally had just like a built-in shocker, right? You know the shocker, 2 in the pink, 1 in the stink, right? You know that, right? Just missing his ring finger. That shit was hilarious. He didn't even lose it in combat. The dumbass was jumping off of a truck, and when he went to go jump off, instead of just climbing down like all of us and just a normal person, he decided he wanted to be kind of badass and just like dismount the vehicle all fucking badass like. And when he went to go jump off, when he let go, his ring caught, and then he just jumped off. And he was a pretty hefty dude. He was like, I don't know, 220 or something like that, and just finger gone. And yeah, that was I heard stories about friendly fire during my deployment. There was some dude in Kandahar that was walking around with his M249 half cocked. You don't walk around with that weapon half-cocked, bro. That's the stupidest shit to do. You don't do that. Not only is it dangerous, but it's bad for the weapon. And he was walking around with it half-cocked, and he shot someone in the foot. They didn't die, but just put a bullet in their foot. And, yeah, that was that. I wouldn't have been wearing my wedding band anyway. You were highly discouraged from wearing it. Really. But in the military, your wedding band is the only piece of jewelry that the military can't tell you not to wear. They highly advise against not wearing it in the field and while deployed. Everywhere else you're fine, but the military cannot tell you that you're not allowed to wear it. It is just highly discouraged, and for that reason, right there. They can't tell you not to wear it. They're just like, hey man, I would advise you to not, but I can't tell you not to. So, whatever you want to do, discretion, your own discretion, really. And yeah, there was one tent with ladies in it. My second, well, we had two ladies my first deployment. One worked in operations, and the other one worked for maintenance. However, the one that worked for maintenance would sometimes go on mission with us. And the reason she would go on mission with us is because we would have to escort civil affairs into these villages to talk to the local elders about rebuilding their village, right? So sometimes we would bring this female with us, and she would interact with the other female locals. As a man, you are not allowed to talk to the females in that country. You're not allowed to make eye contact with them. You're not allowed to speak to them. You're not allowed to engage with them. Nothing. But if you're a female, you can, and there will be no repercussions. It's not that we can't, it's just that if you do, one of these fuckboy ass fucking Afghani dudes is gonna see that you talked to them or shook their hand or looked at them, and guess what they're gonna do? They're not gonna fuck with you. They're gonna fuck her up because it is frowned upon. However, if it's a female, they let that shit slide. So sometimes we would bring this female on mission with us, and she would engage with the local female population. Pretty much how it was. I remember one time when I was over there, this one female walked up to me and stuck her hand out like she wanted to shake my hand. So I shook her hand. Don't know what she wanted, but I shook her hand, and she went about her way, right? The next day we went back through the village, and I saw the same female that shook my hand the day prior. She had two black eyes and was just all fucked up, and she was limping, and she was holding her arm like she was in pain. And I was just like, I really wanted to ask her who did it. I really did, but I was like, you know what? If I engage with this female again, she's just gonna get fucked up even worse. I really wanted to ask her who did it because I wanted to fucking kill this guy. I was like, you pieces of fucking shit. The way they treat women over there is just disgusting, bro. It really is. They treat them like dogs. They treat them like things, not people. They treat them like property. And I was just like, bro. And after that, I learned my lesson. I stayed away from them, didn't make any eye contact with them, didn't look at them. I walked through these villages like they didn't even exist, just so that they wouldn't get any repercussions because of my actions. It's not that we weren't allowed because the military told us not to. It's just well, they kind of did, but it's not, we won't get in trouble for it. It just makes life for them harder and more difficult. Yeah, I fucking despise the way they behave, man. And not everybody over there is bad, bro. Like your civilians, your non-war fighters, they're just everyday people trying to live, trying to make a living, trying to survive, just like the rest of us here in America. It's just all of the other ones, man. I fucking despise them, dude. Like straight up despise the fuck out of them. Just like the way they behave, the way they act, the way they treat people, the way that they treat each other and stuff like that. And sometimes it's no better here in America, but at least there's repercussions here in America if you do some shit like that. Over there, you see a guy beating the fuck out of a female, there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing at all. You can't intervene. You can't say, "Hey, stop." You can't raise your weapon and say, "Get the fuck off her." You have to just you see it and you have to look the other way. Or just grit your teeth and bear it. That's it. You can't do anything. You can't intervene that way at all for no reason. They did teach us that. And so that right there just it got under my fucking skin. I was like, what are we actually doing here? Like I have to see all this shit happen and not do anything about it? Like, it's not that I wanted to play Captain Save-A-Ho, but when you see someone getting fucking beat on that doesn't deserve it, it makes you feel a certain kind of fucking way. Truly. And it's just like, oh my god, I want to put you in a fucking box. Can I come over to Afghanistan and just murder
When I was 22, I got involved.
anyone beating women? You're gonna face serious repercussions. Not by the law, not by the police, not by the Afghan police, not even by the Afghan military. You're gonna face serious repercussions from the men of the country. Because in their mind, they operate like most of us do, right? Like, I can beat the shit out of my brother, but the second someone else touches my brother, I'm beating the fuck out of you, and they operate the same way. So, you could, but they're gonna find you, and they're gonna deal with you. Really. They can't deal with us, but like, if you go over there as just like a random fucking civilian with a vigilante vendetta, then they will get you. They will fuck with you, especially if you're by yourself. The only reason that they don't fuck with us as much as they really should is because we travel in groups, bro. We travel in mass. So, but if you're over there by yourself trying to impose some kind of fucking justice, you won't last very long. Yeah, and we have feminists in this goddamn country talking about, I'm oppressed, blah, 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 fucking, there's a whole bunch of fucking bigots and fucking womanizers and goddamn sexists, and like, are you serious? Really? Someone called you a slut because you posted a picture of your butthole on OnlyFans, and you claim that they're sexist. Meanwhile, these ladies are over there getting their ass whooped because they looked in the wrong